All right, welcome everybody. This is certainly exciting for us at the NAIA. This is the first of a series, a speaker series for us. 6 times during this academic year, on a Sunday evening, the first Sunday of a month, we are going to have a presentation about something that faces campus athletics employees and coaches. The second Sunday of those months, we're going to have a presentation that faces student athletes themselves. So tonight we are very, very lucky to have with us Bob Sweeney, the Vice President of USCA, which is the NAIA's official athletic health and safety partner. That is the U.S. Council for Athletes' Health. And joining Bob is Betsy Cutler, one of the newest partners for the national office, the NAIA. Betsy works with Athlete Link, and that is the official student athlete mental health consultant for the NAIA. So we are going to kind of sit back and listen to a wonderful conversation, a dialogue between Bob and Betsy about the current state of student athlete mental health. The dialogue itself will get to a lot of points that is important for us to hear, but please know that throughout tonight, anyone in the audience can feel free to type something up in the chat, and we will either address it, have our guest address it, or we'll hold on to it, create a document, and send that out afterwards. So again, we are very, very excited, and we will turn it over to Bob and to Betsy, and I'll keep an eye on the chat and mute myself and listen to you all. So let's welcome our friends. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert, and good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you all are at. We really appreciate you joining us here on a holiday weekend and taking time out of your Sunday for this very important topic. I'm going to kick it over to Betsy here for the first question, but I think just by way of introduction, I personally have over a 20-year career in athletic training, all of it at the intercollegiate level. And I would say that early on in my career, probably this area of mental health was really a very underutilized and an area that really wasn't addressed. Probably midway through, we started to see folks come through that were part of the staffs, and they were sports psychologists, and they were focused on really being embedded with the team, and very much sport related things. But Betsy, I think as we're getting more into probably mental health becoming a focus now, I think that clearly it was heading this way, I would say, for the past, 5 to 10 years. And now, as we come out of COVID, as we see some of the things that have gone on with the Olympics and in professional tennis and things like that, I think, Betsy, can you kind of, to start us off here, talk to us about the difference between sports psychology and sports performance and how they pertain to mental health? Because I think really, I will admit personally, a lot of people have some trouble with these, these concepts, and that affects a lot of their decisions as they move along.
Yeah, absolutely. That is totally the truth. Sports psychology is the problem. The term sports psychology can be utilized in both disciplines, both in mental health and in mental performance. The actual definition of sports psychology is an interdisciplinary concept that utilizes kinesiology, physiology, and psychology. And the whole point is to use those concepts in order to improve sport performance. And so when you hear the term psychology, I think that made it very confusing, most definitely for coaches, but obviously for parents and for athletes, because you think the term, you use the term psychology and you assume that has something to do with mental health, but it doesn't. So that's kind of the derivation of the problem of using the term sports psychology, is that it literally uses both mental performance and mental health concepts together. The problem is that you got to know what's the root of an issue for an athlete in order to be able to get them the help they need. I have this really great video. I'm hoping that I can pull it up and we can take a look at it. Everybody can see that?
Hello, athletics community. It's Betsy Cutler here from Cutler Wellness Programs and Athlete Mental Health Link. Today, I'm going to highlight one of the most important concepts that I actually integrate into all of my mental health seminars, whether it's for athletes, coaches, parents, or overall sport organizations. It's the concept of the difference between mental health professionals and interventions and mental performance training. They indeed are not the same thing, but oftentimes the term sports psychology is utilized for both concepts, and that has led to some confusion. Mental health is how people think, how they feel, and how they behave. And as it pertains to athletes, that's both on and off the field of play. Mental performance training is developing mental, physical, and physiological skills and techniques used to improve an athlete's performance. Now, it's combining both mental health and mental performance training that creates an overall mental well-being for our athletes. That being said, does mental health affect athletes' performance? Absolutely. Does mental performance affect athletes' mental health? Absolutely. Determining which one is the cause of your athlete's distress is actually the big key to determining which professional you need to seek help from for your athlete.
So I hope that was clear in kind of what the difference is and how they are utilized. I want to invite in my good friend and one of my strategic partners. Once again, being very transparent, I am not clinical. I am systematic change. I am sport organizational change. I am a consultant. My degree is in education. I am not clinical, but my good friend, Lisa Bontizumi, is. Lisa is a licensed clinician in California and Nevada. She is also a sport performance consultant. And she plays both those roles at Oakland Roots, which is a professional soccer team in California. And so I thought, why not bring in Lisa into this conversation, so that you guys can see some good clinical supports, but she can play both roles. And so, you know, Lisa, you and I have talked about this so many different times. I know, and based on some other really good friends that are trained in both disciplines, they would say probably 60% or 70% of their athletes come in to see them for mental performance, but then it morphs into something else. So I'm wondering, can you talk to us a little bit about maybe specific, you know, without telling names, obviously, but some specific experiences where maybe an athlete came in for mental health and it was really more of a performance issue, and then maybe vice versa, and kind of see how that plays out since you are both trained in both of those disciplines.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that I want to say that it is up and coming that the licensed clinical mental health provider like myself is now being able to do the mental sport performance as well, and that there is a certification process now that's becoming more formal and recognized and needs to happen. And so I after being licensed as a clinical social worker doing therapy for athletes for over 20 years now, I went back, believe it or not, and who the heck did I think I was, to school to go get my coursework done, my training, my supervised hours under a sports psychologist. And now I'm actually going to be taking the exam next month to be the certified mental performance consultant. So I'm excited. It's where the profession is moving. So to be certified and have the standards and ethics and accountability all rolled into that profession is really, really important. So I think that with the athletes I serve, both on the Oakland routes and in my private practice, I'm listed as a clinical provider on the USOPC mental health registry, as well as the NFLPA's clinical directory. That sometimes right now, I mean, as Bob was saying, it is becoming more and more normalized to come in and present with mental health issues. And that's something that Betsy and I have talked about as well, like mental health on a continuum. What does that really look like? Because everyone has mental health, just like we all have physical health. Is that I'm still, I think I could use help. I would like to, but I don't really want to admit I have a mental health challenge going on right now. So maybe I'll go in and say, like, I'm having performance anxiety in my sport. Or like, so for example, for basketball, like I just can't make that free throw. I just can't. And so if they come to me and say, I'm having performance anxiety around making that free throw, I'm like, great, let's talk about it. 9 times out of 10, any presenting issue is not going to be the main issue, if that makes sense. So if they come in presenting with performance anxiety, I'm gonna be like, okay, great, we'll work on it. Here's some skills. Let's train on them. I'll put you on a program. But then I'm also going to be assessing, well, is there anxiety in other areas of your life? What's family life like? What's academics like? How are things with your teammates, your significant partner, intimate partner, if you have one? Like, I want to assess anxiety in general, because one can flow over to the other, because they're full human beings. They're not just going to be anxious in one area and that's it. So if they come for mental health issues, it's more rare, but that's coming more and more. And we're always going to talk about the sport.
All right, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, and here's the other piece is, so when we kind of look at the spectrum of the initials behind our staff in the athletic department, we have a mental health consultant, and then we may have a sport performance professional. But somewhere in the middle, Bob, is usually our trainers. Our trainers tend to be that connection to both ways. I can tell you through my research and it supports all the other research that's out there, is that our athletes, the number one person that they trust in any athletic situation is their trainer. And understanding that that's probably the most trusted relationship they have in an athletic department, what kind of role do you see maybe the trainers having in helping athletes understand, you know, what's at the core of what their issue is and who they need to go to, and how can trainers help facilitate that for our athletes?
Yeah, Betsy, I mean, that really hits it right on the head in terms of the athletic trainer's role, you know, with the student athletes, you know, and I imagine we have quite a few athletic trainers on this call this evening, and I think they would all tell you that one of the main things that you really want to do is gain that trust of your student athletes. You want to be approachable. You know, you're usually dealing in you know, physical injuries, and you want to be able to know about those. You know, for example, for a concussion, you want to make sure, you know, that their symptoms are improving, things like that, and you want them to be honest with you. And I really feel like, you know, in this area of mental health, because of that approachability that you hopefully have you know, created with you know, your student athletes, you would hope to be the first to know. You would hope to be someone who could point them in the right direction, someone who could plug them in. You know, Lisa's point earlier is very well taken. And there's not many professionals like Lisa out there. So you want to make sure that you're getting them plugged into the right people. So this is a very important role for athletic trainers. I will tell you, me personally, you know, going back to my education in the late 80s and early 90s, this really wasn't something that we talked about very much. And so, you know, I personally had to learn this, you know, as I went along in my career, and I would probably say I was pretty weak at it, you know, early on. I think AT education has gotten, you know, much more in tune with the things that we're talking about this evening. And so I think that, you know, it's gaining that trust, as you said, and then secondarily being able to you know, get them to the right person, and on a larger scale, you know, athletic trainers are often charged with figuring out what the resources are in their own community for different things, to help serve their student athletes. And I think this is a big area where, you look at your campus and then you look at your community, and you want to be aware of what's out there. What referrals can you make to get your student athletes plugged into the right person to help them out?
Before we move on real quick, Bob, I will tell you, Lisa and I are, at an institution this weekend, helping them onboard some things. And I will tell you, the spearhead of this entire project is their sport medicine and is their head athletic trainer. And the athletic trainer underneath him will become the mental health coordinator. Does that speak volumes to how important the athletic trainer is in the athletic organization and to the athletes? I mean, for me, that's just like bells and whistles, how important that relationship is.
Absolutely. And really, this has kind of become really the crux of a lot of what athletic trainers are doing right now. Along with, seems like it's funny to say that as we're coming out of COVID, when they've been testing and doing all these things, but no, this is a huge area. I think that kind of leads me, Betsy, to my next question to you. I think, athletic trainers, especially young athletic trainers, really get this, are really solid in this area. But I do think that, and I know we're going to talk about this later this evening, but I do think that other staff members, coaches, student athletes maybe have a hard time clarifying these roles. I guess we could show them, the video you just showed, but really, what are some good ways to help clarify these roles? Given the limited amount of time that coaches and kids have, what's a good way to kind of explain this so that, everybody can stay on the same page in this area?
Great question. I think for me, I'm always going to fall back to education. You have to provide that basic information and education that, one of the top 3 barriers for athletes, and we may be talking about this later, to seek mental health help is mental health illiteracy. They don't know what they don't know. I mean, our kids are 18, 19, 20, 21. They don't understand the difference between being blue and being clinically depressed. And until we start educating them on the basic foundations, it's important to provide clinicians. I've got my good friend Lisa right over here in the next box over. So clinical supports are important, but if they don't know how or when to use them, then they're sitting and suffering in silence without knowing where they need to go and what they need to do. So education is important. I think another piece with the education is that all the research out there is showing that our athletes and our coaches may not be on what my company calls the mental health playbook. So they may not be on the same page, and expectations and boundaries have not been set and not understood between maybe what an athlete thinks a coach should be doing, and then maybe what a coach thinks they should be offering. And the way that you fix that is that you educate both of them on both of those concepts. So that way, maybe your athletes' expectations maybe come down to appropriate, and maybe our coaches' expectations come up to meet it a little more. So that's really the key to educate all groups, trainers, coaches, admin, and athletes on specific concepts, so that way they all are aware of all these interesting nuances, including the difference between mental health and mental performance training.
Betsy, can you describe what you mean when you use the term mental health playbook?
So where we are, we try to, our company tries to, what we tell our athletes and what we tell our coaches when you sit down at a seminars, we're going to tell you, we are building your athlete mental health playbook right now. Let's start right now. Here's the foundation. And then we give them education, resources, and supports. And all that is they're filling in pages inside that mental health playbook. And when we leave, we always say, here's your foundation, but it's up to you as a coach to dig even deeper. Go find some awareness campaigns. Go out there and look for different things. Look for different resources. Know the resources in your community. I saw somebody in the chat talk about that. Know where you can send your athletes. In the NAIA, most of the institutions are small. They may not have a campus counseling facility. So then you need to, as a coach and as admin, you need to know what are the resources when it comes to mental health in your community. So educate yourself. Add pages into your own personal mental health playbook. Likewise, we give the same virtual playbook to the athletes and give them the same thing too. This is your foundation, but you need to add to your own mental health playbook as well. Don't just sit down. Be engaged, ask questions, research, go find information, find a social media campaign. So when we talk about a mental health playbook, it's really this concept of giving foundational education, resources, supports, and for athletes, self-efficacy. So that's when we use that term, that's what my company utilizes.
Betsy, you talked earlier about expectations, the expectations of the student athletes, of the coaches. I think we've all read where, if you ask a student athlete who, and you even mentioned this, that your research showed that really the first person in many instances that a student athlete is going to go to with a mental health challenge is going to be the athletic trainer. And really, I think probably most student athletes would say that the coach is probably down the line on someone that they would approach with this. And the coaches maybe think that they're down the line on someone who should be approached with this. Why do you think there is a disconnection with, in terms of mental health and the expectations? Why is there a disconnect between student athletes and coaches in this area that's very important for their overall health and for their performance?
So there's a couple different comments, and I know Lisa's going to chime in too. The goal here is not to throw shade on coaches and admin. It's about educating them so that they know how to make it better. Part of the reason is that our athletes have unrealistic expectations of their coaches. So athletes, I think, believe that, gosh, all I can say is collegiate coaches, I tip my hat to you, because when it comes to coaches in different systems, high school, AAU, up to the pros, and then you look in the middle of collegiate coaches, it is the most difficult coaching position to hold, because you have students that are coming from parental oversight and they haven't quite found their legs to make the best decisions on their own. And so they're looking at their coaches to play multiple different roles. So the collegiate coach sometimes is playing a parent, is sometimes playing a big sister or big brother. Sometimes that coach, and obviously that coach has to be a CEO, and they have to manage the X's and the O's, and they have to do logistics. And I mean, we could go on and name all of the dynamics that coaches have to play. And our athletes don't see that. And so our athletes sometimes internalize their coaches as being that parent, and being that parent means that you know everything about everything. And so if I have expectations that if I'm stressed and I'm anxious, then you should be able to read it, you should know it, and you should know how to help me. So that's part of the education piece that we need to give to our athletes. It's what my company calls modulation. So we need to modulate our athletes down from expectations and their coaches, and we need to modulate our coaches up a little higher. So in that way, our coaches, depending on, background, history, how long you've coached, you may not necessarily feel comfortable doing the mental health thing. And I know Lisa wants to talk a little bit about that as well for coaches. I get that, but not equipping yourself with basic mental health knowledge and awareness is not supporting your athlete. Like I like to say in my seminar, take that clinical box, see that box that says clinician, take it off your shoulder and put it on a shelf. It's not for you because that's not your training. And I say that to the athletes. So then the coaches can breathe and understand appropriate expectations from both directions as well as boundaries. And that's the value of having an educational seminar for athletes and one for coaches. So that way you are both giving them the same information from different directions and hopefully tightening up so that they're on that same page, or at least in the same book. Let's hope they're at least on the mental health playbook. I don't know if they'll be on the same page. That may take a little while, but let's get them at least in the same mental health playbook. I know, Lisa, you had a couple things that you wanted to add about, what's that difference? Why maybe, coaches, I know you have some thoughts on coaches' struggles and the disconnection between athletes and coaches.
Yeah, I think that, thanks, Betsy. I think that what I've found in my work is that oftentimes the athletes would want to tell their coaches because they're close or have that kind of relationship, but they worry, is that going to impact my playing time? Is my coach going to see me as weak if I tell them about something and that I'm problematic and I'm at risk for performing my job on the field or the court? So it's not like the athletes don't want to, but they're not sure how to trust it. And I think that is also an important boundary and privacy and confidentiality involved there around what can be shared. But I think if a coach is able to say something, and Betsy and I have talked about this all the time, like, hey, Joe, like you're not look like yourself. I saw you on campus. You weren't really hanging out with your teammates like usual, or you're not playing as usual. So having that curiosity, not because you are then charged now to fix it, but you want to have those initial lines of questioning, because then you can refer to a clinician who can then take it from there and do more of a further, more formal assessment. But I think so it's on both sides. There's a trepidation for different reasons. And I think that with more information, that can be clear, and there can be just that solid connection with the coach as well as with the trainer.
Yeah, we do have this concept in our company about coaching with care, coaching with care, so that our coaches learn that, that's a whole different kind of educational support, is teaching them how to create a positive mental health team culture. What does that look like? What are phrases? What's terminology? What are some ways that you can have some mental health conversations? The reality is, and Lisa may want to chime back in on this as well, is, even if you don't know the answer to certain things, being honest and being upfront with your athletes is going to open the door for them to walk through and have that conversation with you. Bringing up just a topic, doing a little research, or, talking about, if you're a female coach, maybe talking about the female triad, and then, just giving information and bringing up and being able to have a mental health conversation with your team in a way that's honest and authentic and transparent. It's what we call coaching for care. And it's how you build rapport and honesty with your athletes, and how those athletes can maybe find a way that if they can't open a door, maybe they can open a window.
And Betsy, I'm going to touch on something. First of all, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit more in depth with coaching with care, because hopefully we do have some coaches on here. But I just wanted to touch on something that Lisa mentioned is the tough spot that sometimes mental health providers and athletic trainers find themselves in. In that kind of triangle between the student athlete who may be dealing with some mental health issues and the coach and themselves. Where and I feel for the coaches in these areas, because they want to know more so that they can better support their student athletes. And Lisa mentioned medical privacy, and that comes in very very huge here. But the coach's point, is always, and it's very well taken. I know these kids, I recruited them, I know their parents. and they just really want to know more. And I think oftentimes, it's just, with medical privacy, it's just not possible. But I think providers can get into a tough spot with that, and it just needs to be, good communication, but also appropriate communication with coaches about their student athletes.
Well, if I may, I'll give an example for the Oakland Roots men's pro team that I work for. They understand all of those privacies and the HIPAA confidentiality and patient therapist confidentiality and things. And so what we do is, because they too, as an organization, want to help their guys. A lot of them come from overseas, international, they have families, kids. And so what we do is we have a regular meeting where I talk about themes. So I don't mention the player's name. And they understand that and they're not asking for it, but like, we want to help as much as possible from our end. So I talk about themes. So they're struggling right now with A, B, or C. And then like, oh, we strategize about how we can help from more of a macro position. So that needs can still be met and the coaches can know and the organization can know, but just not the details. And I encourage all my players, if they want to talk to them, you guys can tell the details. I just can't. So there's a way I can coach them to talk to their coach about that if they wanted to, because they're disclosing their own information. I'm not doing that. So that's how we do it.
I think
Thanks, Lisa.
Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, no, I was just thinking, Lisa, go ahead.
That there are some collegiate programs that have instituted a privacy and confidentiality clause on their medical forms. So when they come in, that includes mental health. And it's not so that athletes' information can be specifically parlayed to our coaches and our trainers, but it does give them just enough where they have enough information that can be released so that a coach understands. My son, Clark is struggling right now. He's in therapy. You don't need to know any of the specifics, but you just need to know that that is something that he is doing in order to better support himself. And so some of those things are happening. And they also, I think the therapists and the clinicians are being really good about telling their athletes, I'm going to let your coach and your trainer know that, you've been here, but whatever we talk about, whatever our concepts are, they are private and they are confidential. And I think most athletes do tend to understand that. Lisa, you might be able to type in a little bit more of that from the collegiate perspective, only because, overall mental health and wellness is important from a coaching and a trainer's perspective as well.
Yes, and we call them reason, right? Students and then athletes. So, and humans first and foremost. So we have to approach them and support them from all areas of life. Every coach is going to say, I want to win. What can we do to win? Well, the best way to win is to have healthy athletes on and off the field, achieving in their academics and performing at top-notch level as possible in their sport. So, there's so many like conflicting situations sometimes if we look at that, but if we look at it as it's all connected, it's all holistic, then that it makes it a little bit easier.
Betsy, I'd like to bring you back to coaching with care just briefly to kind of wrap it up. For the coaches that are on here, what are just the very basic, concepts for them to take away on that premise, or things that as they're starting to build that, and I know there's a lot more to it, but what are maybe 2 or 3 things that at least starting out to get them into that mode they could be doing?
Well, like I said, be willing to engage in mental health conversation. So if there is, say, a module out there that is on a mental health concept, let's say social media and the athlete, that, view it together with your team. Take 15 minutes of your time. It's just 15 minutes, and be dedicated and engaged in that, and have a question or two afterwards. I think just opening the door, like I said before, on a mental health concept is going to teach and show your athletes that you are connected to them, not just how they perform on the field of play, but who they are as people. That would be one suggestion. Another one is, if an athlete has expressed to you that they have a specific issue that's in the mental health genre of struggles, that it's okay for a coach to say, you know, I don't know anything about OCD, but I'd like to learn more, and I want to be here to support you. Tell me how I can support you. I think sometimes our coaches want to feel like they have all the answers. And I've already removed that mental health box off your shoulder, so you don't have to have it. Just be honest. Just be honest with your athletes and say, you know what? I always use Lisa whenever we do presentations. You know, Lisa, I understand that you have anxiety when we leave campus. I don't know if I understand it. I don't understand why, but I hear and I acknowledge that you are struggling with that. How can I help you feel safe when that happens? Tell me some things that I can do to support you. Teach me some of the things that I can say to help support you. I think it's okay for a coach to say, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. And I think that communicates so much to your athlete. You're invested in them bigger than just how they perform. Lisa, you actually go in to the team meetings at the Roots and meet with the coaches there. Do you have one or two pieces of advice that you go in and talk to them about how they can integrate mental health better in their team concepts?
For the coaches?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, it's being open to that conversation, and them knowing that mental health does not equal mental disorder or mental illness. That to have a mental health conversation is, how are you feeling today? How's your family? You know, how's it going? You know, how was travel last week? How did that go? Like, how's your injury coming along? Those are all mental health questions. Like, they don't have to be clinically rooted to have just a regular conversation about checking in with them as a human. So then you learn so much, and they trust in you that you care about them outside of maybe performing in their sport and being a full human. And like, that's when the trust grows, and then there's more that they will want to share. So I just tell the coaches, like, I know that you have a lot of responsibility. A lot of the guys are young. And so there's so much growing to happen, and their brains aren't even fully developed till like 25 or so. So it's like, we're already working against ourselves, but just being open and being able to have these conversations that are actually very impactful and mean a lot to the athletes.
You know, one other concept there that Lisa and I actually talked about this morning, and that is that our coaches are on the mental health continuum too. Mm-hmm. And it is important for our athletes to know that, you know, our coaches need support, and our coaches need to have mental health. And the best way really kind of for our coaches to show that they support mental health is to model really good mental health behavior themselves. And sometimes it's okay for a coach to say, I'm taking a time out. Sunday from 2 to 5 is my family time. That's my mental health time. If there's an emergency, here's the backup plan. And I think coaches need to hear that. I think administrators need to hear that it's okay for our coaches to have a downtime and maybe be off the clock for a little bit, because family time is important. Rest and relaxation and refocusing is important from our coaches' perspective as well. And I think if our coaches model it, then I think our athletes are going to see that our coaches really are invested in this whole concept of taking overall better health care of ourselves.
And even I'm just as interested in your mental health as your physical health. I'm just as interested. There's no, you know, one is better than the other. They all work together to be the most optimal human. So just being able to say that I'm interested in your mental health, how you're feeling, what you're thinking about, you know, where you're at, like, so it's going to help everyone all the way around.
Betsy, you've explained how student athletes and coaches sometimes aren't on the same page with mental health playbook. Let's look at the athlete's mental health playbook specifically right now. Can you go into some detail on factors that impact the student athlete's resistance from seeking mental health support?
Yeah, there's three major ones. For me, the first one, it's mental health illiteracy, which I touched on earlier. Our athletes are not educated in regards to, are they having bad sleep patterns? What's affecting that? Are they utilizing, drugs or alcohol in order to compensate for other things? So we have to, and they're coming in honestly from high school uneducated. That is a whole different realm that Lisa and I've talked about in trying to matriculate athlete mental health down to the high school levels. But that's not happening now. I mean, literally, I have researched 10 different states and only 2 or 3 of them have even one little piece of information. So our athletes are coming in uneducated on basic mental health knowledge. They don't know the difference, like I said earlier, of being blue. So if you break up with somebody, which we know as an 18 or 19-year-old is such a huge life issue. And we have to acknowledge that is an important issue for them to go through. But when you are not able to get past it, 2-3 weeks, you're sad, you're blue. By week 6, if you're not able to work through that, you have moved into the need for clinical supports. And if they don't know that, they're going to sit and suffer in silence. And that's a really, really big key. And listen, Lisa's a clinician, and she and I were joking today that she didn't commit to memory all the different signs and symptoms of all the different issues that are out there. You look it up, you have access to them. And so it's providing access to those signs and symptoms so that they can look it up. Once again, that's that piece of self-efficacy, is being responsible for their behavior and advocating for themselves and researching some things for themselves. So that's one piece, is that we need to offer them mental health education because they are illiterate when it comes to mental health concepts and signs and symptoms. The second piece is probably really a touchstone here for the NAIA as well, and that is access to mental health supports and clinicians. For those campuses that actually have campus counseling centers, they're open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. So if you're an athlete, if you could please have an issue from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, we really appreciate it. How does that support our athletes? It doesn't, because our athletes' time is from 6 a.m. until probably 11 o'clock at night. It's scheduled. Mandatory this, mandatory that, practice, training, workouts, study halls, group projects, all those things. And so when our athletes, just like pretty much everybody else, when they start sinking into what they're feeling, it's in the downtime. It's at midnight. It's at 2:30. It's, Friday after everybody has gone out and they're at home by themselves. That's when those issues come up. That's when they need those supports. And so it is important to provide for them, even if it can't be campus related, but resources that are community related, or access to people like Lisa that they can connect with and have a telehealth meeting. So really the second really, really big factor is clinical accessibility. Another piece of that, probably more for larger institutions, but it may be also on the NAIA, depending if you have campus counseling. And that is, it's the whole concept of big dog on campus. How many of our basketball players are going to roll up into campus counseling center so that everybody can see the 6'4" dude walking in to get some counseling? That's not going to happen because they have, that's the third, that brings in the third piece, and that's stigma. So so stigma is, there's multiple kinds of stigma. My research has shown that athletes really have embraced fellow athletes seeking mental health, and that they are not judging their fellow teammates for needing to seek mental health or have open mental health conversations. That stigma has decreased, and that's largely because of the last 5 years. And shout out to Naomi Osaka and the Olympics and the number of people in the last 4 or 5 years, but specifically this summer, athletes that have shouted out and said, I'm struggling and it's okay to not be okay, and I'm going to tell you. But the other piece of stigma is the personal perceived stigma. And our athletes, although they feel it's okay for their teammates and their friends to go seek help, they're not willing to share that they're suffering. So I can support you, but I don't trust that you're going to support me. So I'm going to sit in silence myself. So some stigma is better. Personal perceived stigma is still strong, and we need to work on that. So those are kind of the top 3 issues. I know Lisa would probably like to step in and have a couple comments about any of those 3. Lisa, you got anything on those 3?
Yeah, I think stigma is huge. And I think what I found and what I prioritize wanting to know about is what's the influence of your race or ethnicity or cultural beliefs around mental health. That is so important. A lot of my athletes are first, second generation from their country of origin, and they're raised, even though maybe in this country, with the values, religion, narrative of what mental health is. That mental health is, we're not even saying it for one, we're barely even asking you how you feel, but it means that if we bring it up, we're wondering if you're crazy. If you are someone who is not in touch with reality or needs to be hospitalized. That's when in a lot of the cultures that I work with my athletes, that's what they were raised with. Like, and there's traditional ways that they deal with that. If that even comes up, that does not include, a therapist. That's a Western thing. We don't do that. We don't trust it. We don't trust medical providers in any sort of way. So to not bring in the cultural piece, the religious beliefs, the history of that particular race or ethnicity in this country or in other countries around how they might have been used for experimentation, like the Tuskegee experiment, is really, really important to acknowledge and name. And any clinician who works with athletes, that's a specific area you need to be touching on.
We talked a lot about, the different concepts of what are some of the barriers for athletes to seek mental health help. I'm wondering, we know who our athletes are going to, Bob. They're going to their trainers. What are some ways, that our trainers can help facilitate the education? I also think I'd love to hear more as well, because the trainer also, I think, has a unique relationship with the coaches and has a unique relationship with athletes. I'm wondering if our trainers, just like what Lisa and I are doing this weekend, those trainers are pivotal. They're the ones that are making it happen from the coaches and the athletes' perspective. What are some of the roles and some of the things that our trainers can help do to bridge maybe those information gaps between those 2 pieces?
Yeah, Betsy, great question. And one of our physician leaders here at the U.S. Council for Athletes Health, he's actually one of our co-founders, Dr. Kading, for many years has described the role of the athletic trainer as being the hub of the wheel, where you have information going in and out from different parents in, athlete in, coach in, and then disseminating that information, getting it out to the people that need to know. They have administrative tasks that they're doing, and that comes in and as well. So your point's well taken, that they seem to sit many times in the center of all of this. I think in terms of, if I were going to talk to a young athletic trainer as just the basics of what you need to know, I think for me, first and foremost is, athletic trainers are big into emergency action planning. So, what do we do if the worst case scenario happens? I think this is huge for athletic trainers is, what if you get that call in the middle of the night, or that, that athlete that really has gotten to a crisis point, maybe without anybody noticing. What are the steps you need to take to make sure that that athlete, is safe and has a good outcome. That first and foremost, and really having those conversations with coaches, because they might get those conversations. There's a lot of people that could get those conversations. We say that it's the athletic trainer a lot, and it probably is, but other people can get those too, and they need to know what to do in that situation. So let's put worst case scenario aside, because that to me is number one. But when you're talking about everyday things, it's really what we've been talking about this entire evening is recognizing, having a culture in your athletic training room where these conversations can occur. So approachability and helping your coaches even make their programs more open for all of these conversations. Not that, a coach probably doesn't want everybody sitting in a room and just, having these conversations, but everybody needs to know that this is going to be okay, that these conversations are going to occur. And this is just part of what we talk about. We talk about weightlifting, we talk about nutrition, and we talk about, mental health. So this is just part of the deal. And whether it's mental health, mental performance, it probably should be both. But I think athletic trainers can do a good job of fostering that culture to have that happen in their programs. And finally is you spoke about access to care. It's knowing what your resources are, whether your campus resources, your community resources, resources such as yours, which are available online, and sometimes in places where maybe, I'll be honest, we're out of a big city, but I don't know that the mental health resources here, especially in that 18 to 24, 26-year-old age group, we don't have enough for all of them right now, and so it's knowing what's available and knowing how to bridge those gaps when it's not available. That's a critical role of the athletic trainer. And maybe it's raising your hand and letting somebody in a position of authority know we don't have enough, and we could run into some problems if we don't get better in this area.
What I do want to add regarding resources, and Betsy and I are building something great to help a lot of people. I do want to say this is Suicide Prevention Month this month, and that I want to name that and acknowledge it. And hey, that's a conversation starter right there. Like, hey, player A, what do you think about that? Like, that's a thing. Like, dang, like, let's talk about it. Or do you know anybody, or like whatever, who's experienced this? But I think that a lot of the collegiate athletes, until they're 24, 25, I believe, are under their parents' insurance. So being able to help them navigate within their insurance to find a provider. There's not that many athlete-specific clinicians though. So I think that's super important if you can find one, and find someone who is preferred by the athlete and the athlete's family. Like, as a woman of color, it's preferred that a lot of my athletes and families who are of color want to meet with someone who's of color. And so that's important. And I'm a woman, and that could be preferred sometimes. So being able to know not only where to look for it, but then to shop for it and be selective. It's just like buying a car. Like, you're not gonna like buy that car until you test drive it and do your research on it, right? Like, research me, look me up, research anyone that you're gonna put yourself in front of to share some very intimate, personal details. And that there's an approachability and a receptivity and a vibe that you feel open enough to do so. So I think that's super important to state as well.
Thanks, Lisa. As we're getting here, 5 minutes to go here, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. I'm going to kick it back to Robert and facilitate questions. And again, if if folks want, for the sake of time, if folks want to email questions, I'm sure that between Betsy, myself, and Lisa, we can get you answers, throughout the course of the next couple of weeks. But if there are any specific questions, and then I think Robert probably has some housekeeping items too as we wrap up.
Absolutely. Bob, thank you so much. I am going to share a screen here pretty soon that's got Bob and Betsy's contact information, because to all of our friends from member institutions and from conference offices, tonight was not necessarily supposed to lead to a closure. This was the beginning of a conversation. So not only the beginning of a conversation between you on campus and your student athletes, which is important, knowing that you don't have to give them closure, you have to empower them and make them feel comfortable turning to the right source of support, which could be you, but it might be a clinician, right? So embedded somewhere in the chat, you'll see a document that Betsy and Bob have given us that kind of help you start those conversations that Lisa mentioned. So that's the beginning of one conversation. The second conversation that tonight is about is beginning that conversation between you and, if you need it, Bob and Betsy. All right. USCA and Athlete Link are two outstanding resources. They're two great partners. And again, it's to help you support your student athletes. That's why these two groups have agreed to come on and talk with us and share their insight, just to make us feel more comfortable in our roles on campus and at the national office and at the conference office. This is something that a lot of our generation might not have dealt with, but today's student athlete, and you've seen it this past summer, they're recognizing that it is just as important to their development as the physical health that we focused on 20, 30 years ago. So let me try to find for you all the proper screen, if I can, and I will share that with you. This is going to be Bob and Betsy's contact information. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, so that might be a good thing. But again, please know that the reason we had this was to begin a relationship for our friends on campus and our partners. So as I share this screen right there, we'll just let it sit here for a while if you all can see that. Bob, can you give me a thumbs up? Can you see it? Okay. There is Bob's information and there's Betsy's information. Thank you so much, and thank you, Lisa. One other thing to keep in mind, and I'll switch the screen in a little while, is next Sunday is going to be another conversation about student athlete mental health that's directed to students. So please, I will share this link. I will share a link to the very same group that has this one, and ATCs, coaches, administrators. If you all want to share that with your student athletes, you certainly can. It's going to be a little more practical, a little more intimate. It's going to be Betsy and me on our own, engaging your students and just letting them know that there is acknowledgement that the mental health side of their experiences is very, very important. So Bob, Betsy, Lisa, thank you so much for everything tonight. I am going to leave this going a little bit longer, and Bob, I think I'm putting up the certificate for those of our friends who need it. Is that? Yep. All right. So I will get on there and share in the chat the certificate for those of you that need a CEU. Again, that's provided by Bob, and our friends at USCA have arranged to make that work. We'll do a few more later this year. Any closing thoughts?
For me, thank you for this opportunity, Robert. This is such an important conversation. It is so important to start it, to be open. If we just start, if our coaches and our admins and our trainers just start at right there, just be open for an experience and being open and honest for yourself and for your athletes, I think great things can be there for your system.
Very good, Betsy. Thank you. And to our ATC friends out there, I just posted in the chat the certificate. The one thing that we are going to do, I'm going to send an email out probably on Tuesday. Hopefully it'll have the link to this recorded session, but then it is also going to have a survey about today's session. Again, this is the first in our speaker series, and we need as much feedback as we can to tighten things up for you. Let me see here. I want to acknowledge a couple chats here, and I'm in no hurry unless you all are. An assistant coach as well as a yoga instructor wanted to use yoga as mental health tool, but since that's out of the scope of practice, wanted to know if there were any do's or don'ts surrounding it. This is about yoga. I work on controlled breathing and mental pictures, and I do let them know that they can come to me, but any other advice would be great. Now keep in mind, if we don't give closure on a certain question tonight, please reach out directly to our friends on this panel. I'm gonna go through a second question also, and then I'll turn it over if any of you want to discuss it out loud or if you'd rather do it offline. Here's a second one. Lisa mentioned about culture. If there is a Native American athlete, I would like to offer my contact info for any athletes that may want to visit with me. Coach Ruben Littlehead at Bacone College in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So that is outstanding. That is outstanding. And Lisa was exactly right that students, there are times that students feel comfortable in one setting and not in another setting for completely understandable reasons. So there's some great information right there for any Native American student athlete that is looking for that kind of level of comfort. There we go. Coach Ruben Littlehead, thank you. Thank you.
You know, Lisa, you might be the one to be able to talk about the assistant coach and the yoga. Yes. And integrating that. So maybe if you want to answer that question.
Yes, absolutely. Is it Joy? I hope I'm saying your name correctly there. That I love that you're doing that. You're blending physical and mental health together in yoga. It employs what you're talking about. The breathing, breath work is so important for performance and for anxiety management. And for getting up for a game or coming down for a game. So the fact that you have that knowledge as a trainer, or I'm sorry, a trainer or an assistant coach, whoever you're involved and have interface with athletes, I think it's great. It's about your level of boundary and availability to keep that as long, alongside what you're already doing and make it complementary maybe. I think it's great. I have no qualms about it. It's your level of availability and what you're willing and wanting to do.
Okay, thank you so much.
A friend of ours said they couldn't see the certificate. That's okay. Remember, you can text me or email me 24/7. Tuesday, when I send the survey out, I can get the certificate to you. So you might have to reach out to me one-on-one just to remind me, but do that and we'll get you taken care of.
And if any other questions come up, Betsy has my contact information. So Betsy can forward any questions you might have for me in my role. I'm happy to answer anything.
Lisa's on my website. So if you go to my website, you can hit her up.
Well, we are over our 60 minutes. So Lisa, Betsy, Bob, thank you all very much. For those of you that were in the chat, thank you. And again, this is just the beginning. So please keep an eye out for an email from us and we'll reach out and we'll keep this going. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.